Hey y'all, we are back for another episode. I'm excited to have on a guest with me today, Allison, and I want to tell you a little bit about her before we jump into the interview today. So, Allison is a seasoned psychotherapist and an EFT practitioner. After experiencing a divorce herself, she decided to focus on helping other midlife women find healthy, available single men who will love and adore them. Yes, please. How many women out there do I know that need this episode today? I'm excited. She works using a powerful tool called EFT tapping. I love EFT tapping. And this helps women clear all blocks to successful dating and open up to the excitement of falling in love again. Because as we know, after a breakup, a divorce, that can be very, very draining. She also recently published a book called Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. And this is a guide to igniting your inner goddess and finding the man of your dreams. I'm super excited to talk with her more today about dating during the midlife and what sex looks like after divorce and just all of the things in between. So let's stay tuned, keep watching, and let's jump into this episode with Allison. Okay, we are on. We're back. We have Allison Jayne Ewing on the podcast today. You already heard her bio, but I'm really, really excited, Allison, to have you on the show to talk more about EFT and tapping, what it is, how it can relate to helping people within their sex lives and find love again and feeling confident in themselves, and definitely like hearing your story and what led you to this. So thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's interesting because my story is not too unsimilar from yours. I actually started out on a crisis hotline when I was in undergrad and a psychology major. Yeah. And I went and I got my master's in social work. So, very similar
Oh
path.
my gosh, yeah, that is so wow. That is so what a small world. And you're not in Michigan though. Where do you live?
I'm in Chicago. I'm
Oh,
not
so
too
you're
far away. Yeah. Yeah. I'm in the Midwest. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting when I was listening to your story. So yeah, similar to you, I kind of worked sort of in the trenches, if you will. In the beginning of my career, I worked in the inner city for Department of Children and Family Services for kids that were abused and neglected. And I just sort of did the traditional, psychotherapy route for a long time. And actually what ended up shifting everything for me was very serendipitous. It was basically, I kind of got in the weeds with my CEUs, which I'm sure you know what that is, but for other people, it's continuing education units. And every 2 years in Illinois, we need 30. And I think I needed 26, and I had like 4 months left to do it. So I was in a bit of a panic. And I knew by that point that I was already much more interested in mind body techniques. I had been doing a lot of breath work and yoga and things like that with the kids on the psychiatric hospital I was working on at the time. And I was finding that to be effective in ways that the talk therapy wasn't always. And so I looked into getting trained. I was thinking either EMDR, which is a mind body technique, or EFT tapping. And the only reason I picked the EFT tapping, honestly, was because the training for the Midwest happened to be in Chicago, coming up about 4 weeks after I decided I was going to do it. And so I signed up for 2 days worth of training. I thought, great, I'll get lots of hours. And then about a week before the training started, they sent out an email, and the address of where the actual Chicagoland training was a mile up the street in my town, in my suburb outside of Chicago. And I was kind of blown away by that. And then when I went, the first day I got there, we were going around doing introductions, and one of my very dear friends had just passed away about a week maybe before this training. And her name was Cindy, and she lived in Naperville, and she died of breast cancer. And I promise you, this is a true story. Woman 2 rows in front of me said, "Hi, my name is Cindy. I'm from Naperville, and I work with breast cancer survivors."
wow.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I just had a moment. Right? I know, I do too every time I tell the story. And I just thought, okay, universe, I guess I'm in the right place. And I did. I loved the training so much. The first 2 days, I decided to stay for the next two. I decided to get certified. And then fast forward a few years after that, when I went through a divorce in my 40s, and I realized, wow, now I'm a single mom. I have no family here. My kids were still kind of little. They were 9 and 11. And I knew I needed to work from home. And at that time, people with EFT coaching practices were all on Zoom. This is way pre-pandemic. And everybody was working on Zoom. So I knew it was a good opportunity for me to just switch my practice fully from psychotherapy to coaching at that point so that I could work from home, having little kids at home.
Wow. Yeah, very, very similar stories, definitely. And I love too that you mentioned EMDR therapy. I come from a therapy background, and so I had done years of talk therapy for my own personal work, and then it wasn't until I got into doing EMDR therapy, which I didn't do it for the eyes. I did it based on sound and tapping because it was virtual. And so the tapping then comes in. And so now I like to use the EFT tapping as more maintenance. I don't see my therapist more on an as needed basis now for the EMDR if something, comes up. But the tapping is something that I find I can do on a daily basis to really manage any sort of intrusive thought or bullshit that really tries to creep in and hijack my vibe over here. So but yeah, to be able to have this conversation with you today as it relates to dating, you went through this thing yourself, as you said in your story, going through a divorce, and you said like midlife to go through that. That's such I can imagine it's such a blindsiding event. You think you're with this person and that's your end game, and then things change. And so yeah, tell us more about how that all continued to transpire for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with what you just said there. It's a very important and sort of nuanced thing that I don't think everyone thinks about. But when you're married, you have a certain identity, right, of this married person, and add kids to that and this mom. And I always just thought no one goes into marriage, I don't believe, thinking they're going to end up divorced, right? And so I just assumed, this is the person I'm going to grow old with. And when that changes, I think that, you can have feelings about the loss of the relationship, but I actually think, and for me personally, this was more the case, that loss of identity was huge. I mean, I really felt unmoored and untethered and just like, what now? Where do I go now? Where do I go from here? And I was very grateful that I had EFT tapping. And I do think one of the best things about it, and one of the things that I prefer about it slightly over EMDR, even though I think they're both great, is that it is a self-help tool. And you can use it on a regular basis, and you can use it every day, and it can clear feelings as they're coming up. So I definitely used it a lot going through my divorce process and my adjusting to being a single mom, which was a big deal. And I have used it a lot in dating. And when I decided, I was dating for several years before I decided to write the book, although I did decide to write the book in 2020. And it took me a couple of years to actually make that happen. I think I had the outline in during COVID, and I thought, I have all this time in COVID, I'll definitely write this book. And I didn't. But 2 years later, I did. And obviously I published it recently. And to me, the book was basically kind of almost like a love letter to my fellow single women, because I realized that I had gone through this really big transformational process of letting go of that identity of who I was as a married person, stepping into this new identity as single at midlife and dating again and having to start all over. And frankly, how do I put it? In an environment that younger people are probably more used to, the online dating thing that didn't exist last time I was single. I mean, it was not a thing. So just also having to adjust, there was almost like a generational processing piece that happens, I think, when you become single again at midlife. And so And I realized that I had the knowledge and the experience, the lived experience of that, but I also had all this knowledge and experience from both being a psychotherapist and being an EFT practitioner. And that's when I decided, okay, I'm going to write this book where I'm going to bring all of this together, everything that I've learned, my knowledge about relationships, sex, masculine, feminine energy, all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to put it in this book, but I'm going to add the secret ingredient of EFT tapping. Mm-hmm. Because I think one of the problems, if you will, with self-help books is you read it and you have all these great insights and all this, great cognitive shifts. And you think, okay, great. Now I know this. Now I'm going to do it. But then it doesn't always translate into actually changing A, how you feel about something, B, your behavior, how you act. I saw a lot of my fellow single women friends and clients repeatedly dating sort of what I call the same guy in a different body, right? Like not a good guy, settling for less than they're worth, allowing themselves to be treated poorly, or just maybe, getting breadcrumbs, hot and cold behavior, things like that over and over. And I knew that these women knew better, and they would actually talk about other women doing the same thing they were doing. And they would point it out and say, I see that in them, but they couldn't shift in themselves. And that's when I realized that this is a tapping issue, because the brilliance and the wonderful, powerful thing about tapping is it helps you shift at a subconscious level what you can't shift at a conscious level. Mm. So one of the things I talk about in my book is the difference between autobiographical memories and sensory memories. Okay. So autobiographical memories are those memories where you think like a story. You say, I remember when this happened to me and that went on and so on and so on. So those are memories that you can target in regular talk therapy, and you can reframe, and you can do the cognitive behavioral shifts around, the traditional CBT type of approach. Sensory memories, however, do not have an autobiographical story to them. So the example that I use, and I credit John Breer with this because he's the one who taught me this when I was trained with him many years ago, is to say out loud, cafeteria lunchroom. And when I say that, does a smell come to your mind? Not such a pleasant smell. Okay, so that is an example that most people can relate to. That is a sensory memory. So you didn't think, I remember that my cafeteria smelled awful. No, you had an instant hit, an instant memory. And so what happens a lot of times is we get tripped up by sensory memories that we are not even consciously aware of. And further, we can't access them through an autobiographical kind of approach. So we're not able to talk about them and shift them at that cognitive mind level. We have to go below that and access them through the body. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think there's a lot of, great mind body techniques coming, up these days and being more and more popularized and taken seriously. And EFT tapping is my personal favorite at this point, because it's easy, it's portable, it's literally at your fingertips. You can do it whenever you want. And so if you have a sensory memory that your dad was very hot and cold to you, then you have the association at a subconscious level that love means hot and cold. Mm. And so when you meet a guy who's hot and cold, you feel in love. And you feel like that person loves you, even though it's just basically an activation of this sensory memory that is occurring. And so if you can clear out that sensory activation using EFT tapping, suddenly you will no longer feel attracted to those men. And then the other thing that's really cool is when you sort of tap, I call it clearing out the emotional gunk. When you start to tap and clear out emotional things, traumas, whether they're big T traumas or little T traumas, mm-hmm. and things like that, it kind of seems to create this like vacuum in our minds where insight can drop in, and suddenly you start thinking differently, seeing things differently, and you are actually creating new neural pathways every time, because the tapping is really shutting down your fight or flight center. And so it's opening you up to be able to access your, good frontal lobe cognitive functioning, which is our judgment, reasoning, logic, all the things you actually want to decide who you're dating based on.
Oh, this is so good. And I appreciate that you also talked about that loss of self that we might experience, because I hear this come up a lot with women, particularly after having kids and going through this loss of self. But bringing it back, and that loss of self after a divorce or breakup is, if you can switch the mindset, also such an opportune time to rediscover yourself or reestablish yourself, grow, become, step into this new version of you, and with new titles or labels, if you will. And so you're talking a lot about EFT tapping, and now I'm over here like wanting to write in my daily planner every day, like tap, tap, tap every single day. And I know it has been such a great coping mechanism for me, even just doing the karate chop when I'm, feeling triggered out and about, or and whatnot. So can you show us, well, first, if you want to maybe give like what the definition of EFT tapping is, if somebody was wanting to look into this, and then maybe just a quick little demo of what it could look like. So for people, if you're listening right now, you can head over to YouTube and actually watch this interview with Allison. And so you can see exactly how it's done.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. And it is often referred to as EFT tapping because what we're doing is tapping on our own body's acupressure points. The number one question I get asked is, do the points really matter? Isn't it just because you start thinking about things, because you start focusing on, whatever it is you want to clear? And I always say, well, A, I'm sure you focused on what you want to clear before and it didn't clear. Mm-hmm. But B, there's actually a lot of really great research that is coming to light more and more every day about how effective EFT tapping is, not just at a cognitive level, but also at a biological level. So when you tap on these specific acupressure points, what they have found is it very quickly moves you into an alpha brainwave state. So for those who don't know alpha, that's that brainwave state you start to go into as you're beginning to drift off to sleep. If you meditate, that's an alpha brainwave state. If you do yoga and shavasana, that sort of floaty feeling you get, that's alpha brainwave. So simply by tapping on your acupressure points, you will shift your mind there. They've had people on EEGs showing that it shifts very quickly. So what I also love to say that point for is, people sometimes get hung up on, am I saying the right thing when they first learn tapping? And it doesn't actually matter that much because you're doing good for your body.
Okay.
So when we have an intense emotion, we are in what's called our sympathetic nervous system. And when you start stimulating these acupressure points, it moves you into that alpha brainwave state. It also dramatically lowers your cortisol level, your stress hormone level. And so it very quickly moves your central nervous system into a parasympathetic nervous state. And our central nervous system simply cannot be in both at the same time. It's kind of like an on-off switch. And so I always describe it as, if you tap on a big emotion, it's like pouring water on a fire of emotion, because it simply just puts it out. And sometimes it takes a little bit. There's a lot of sort of 1-minute wonders out there online, and those do happen. I've seen them a million times, but sometimes you have to persist a little bit, and by a little bit, I'm talking like 15, 20 minutes. It's not even that dramatic, but some people get, frustrated and give up quickly because they've seen some of these videos of 1-minute wonders. So just know that keep tapping until the feeling is gone, and it will go away, because all feelings are like an ocean wave. All feelings come and they crest, but they do go away eventually. No one emotion has ever lasted forever. So as long as you know that and you allow yourself to feel it while tapping, it's going to go away a lot more quickly. And it's very cool. It feels like the emotion just sort of evaporates out of your body at a certain point. You felt that too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So it's very cool. But the key is to keep going, because I do know sometimes people will start to get emotional and then stop. And then you're just basically re-traumatizing yourself. Why would you want to do that to yourself? So don't do that. Just keep tapping through the point. So let's just go over the points really quickly for anyone out there who's into Chinese medicine. These are all meridian end points, except for the last one. And so they have done studies where they've had people just tapping on random places in their body versus these particular points. And it's these particular points that get those effects that I was just describing. So the first point is known as the karate chop or side of the hand. And so it's just the fleshy part of your hand below the knuckle of your pinky. And you just want to tap. You preferably want to use your fingertips if your nails are not too long, and you can do that. And you just tap there gently but firmly. And this point in the EFT tapping is when something is always used called a setup statement. And I should back up and say EFT tapping is generally led by a practitioner. That's why it's a coaching technique and not a therapy technique. So the practitioner will say a statement based on the information they've gathered from the client, and then the client repeats it back. And the statement usually goes along the lines of, even though I have this such and such problem, I love and accept myself anyway. What we're doing there is we are priming the brain to accept what it is you're trying to clear. So there's this really unfortunate paradox in mental health where the harder you try to get rid of something, the more it persists. So it's very unfortunate, and it is such a fine line. And so EFT tapping is kind of trying to balance that out. So a lot of times when I do it with clients, actually, I'll say, even though I'm angry about being single again at midlife, I accept that I have this anger. So a lot of times I'll focus on accepting the feeling, because we need to actually accept the feeling, accept where we are in the moment before we can move on and release it. And most of the time we don't want to do that. So, but again, if you get activated saying, I accept this anger while you're tapping, you're pouring that water on it, on the fire, and you're deactivating it. So that's what's great. So we say this typically 3 times about the same statement. Sometimes you tweak it a little bit, and then you'll move to the inside of your eyebrows, right at the bridge of the nose and where the inside of the eyebrows are. And people often ask me to 1 hand, 2 hands. It doesn't really matter. The research has shown it's effective either way. So you can do what feels comfortable. And then here you would just state the problem. So in the example I just gave, angry about being single again at this point in life. Then you would go to the outside of your eye, not the temple, a little bit in closer to the eye, and just tapping there and just say, angry about being single at this point in life. Next is under the eye on that bony ridge, right in line with your pupil, angry about being single at this point in life. Next point is under the nose where the upper lip and nose meet, tapping there, angry about being single. Next point is in the chin crease. So it's right in the fold there, angry about being single. The next point is called the collarbone, but it's actually below the bone. So you want to find the hollow in your neck and go about 1 inch down and 2 inches over. And there are those little dents. And then just tap there, angry about being single. The next point is just under the arm. My camera's not going to show it real well. Right along your rib cage for women. It's where your bra strap goes around, just tapping there with an open hand usually at this point, and just say angry about being single. And then the last point is what's called the crown point in a lot of traditions. And it is where all the meridians in the body cross over. And so then you just tap there, say angry about being single, and just go ahead and take a deep breath. And then check in with yourself. And the best way to know if you're making progress is before you start, just write down a number 1 to 10. Don't overthink it, whatever comes first, of how intense the feeling is that you're trying to work on. So if it was like an 8 to start, now check back in and say, does it still feel like an 8? And pretty rarely does it feel the same. Even if it goes down by 1, at least you know you're moving in the right direction. And I would say it's very, very rare that I've had someone not at least go down by 1 from a single tapping round.
Yeah. And for somebody that's doing this, then would you recommend, if they were trying to do it by themselves, or even just to test it out, even, would you recommend doing some journal prompts beforehand, or even just like free writing a journal to help them with the things that they're wanting to focus on? throughout their tapping.
Absolutely. And the reason that actually that's very important is because if you try to tap too broad or too general, one of two things will happen. You just won't get good results. And then you'll think tapping doesn't work. And it absolutely works. So I don't want you to think that. And the other thing is you can go into overwhelm and just get yourself really overwhelmed. So there's a little saying in EFT world, for results to be terrific, you need to be specific. Little rhyme to help you remember. So what I think writing out helps is to break it down really specific. So like, let's say you are thinking about having to date again. And one of the things that I talk about in my book, that's a big thing for my clients, is what I jokingly call the idea of new naked, right? I mean, if you've been married to the same person for a really long time, and now all of a sudden you have to start to think about being naked in front of someone new, it's very panic inducing, right? It can create a lot of anxiety. And so if you're thinking about that, you can become pretty easily overwhelmed. Like, oh my gosh, I haven't done this in so long, or my body doesn't look the same. I don't like this. I don't like that. You can go into like spiral, right? So you want to just write down all those things, tease them apart, and then just tap on one at a time. Even though I'm scared of being naked in front of someone new again, go through a round on that. Then you might think, even though I'm insecure about my body now, so that would be the next tapping. So we call them tapping targets. Mm-hmm. And you kind of want to think about it like, if you're a visual person like I am, thinking about it like a tabletop. And so the top of the table is your problem. So a problem of being scared of being sexually intimate with someone again, right? And then the legs are the various things keeping the problem in place. And you want to tap out one leg at a time. And the cool thing is you don't have to tap out all four legs to get a table collapse, so 3 often does it. So you can start tapping on aspects of your problem one at a time. And you can all of a sudden feel like, no, I'm ready to get it on before you even clear everything that was on your journaled list.
Okay. I like that explanation. I've like I said, been doing tapping, but I'm learning so much more about it already. So thank you for that. And so when we're moving into then for women wanting to manifest or attract or just find the non-assholes, as you put it in your sheet here, not the assholes, we want to find Mr. Right, like, or Mrs. Right even. How would somebody use this technique in more of that manifesting way?
So there's 2 primary ways that you can use tapping to sort of magnetize yourself to draw in better men. And it's based on the idea that you can have limiting beliefs about men that inform your brain and your decision making. Or most people do have both. You can have limiting beliefs, or I'm not going to call it limiting beliefs, fears about yourself. Okay. So in the first case, limiting beliefs about men, they sound like there are no good men left out there. And I can't even tell you how depressing it is to be dating in midlife, because so many people say that to me all the time. Everywhere I go, they're like, oh, it must be hard. There's really no good guys left, right? And I always have to say, actually, dating has completely restored my faith in men, because I've dated nothing but great guys since I've become single. And then, they're often shocked, but I realize that this is a limiting belief. And there is a part of our brains, the reticular activating system, that is responsible for identifying patterns. It's like you decide you want to buy a Jeep, and then suddenly you see Jeeps like everywhere you go, right? Your reticular activating system turns on. So if you truly think there's no good men left out there, guess what? Your brain is only going to see the assholes. Like that's all, like it's literally going to overlook the good guys. And so you have to clear out that limiting belief. So the way you use tapping to clear limiting belief is one of 2 ways. You can either say to yourself, okay, how do I feel when I think about there's no good men left out there? Oh, I feel panic. Even though I feel panic, there's no good men left out there. There's, a panic at this thought, clear the thought. Or you can simply say the thought out loud, okay, there's no good men left out there, and decide on a scale 1 to 10, how true does that feel? And if it feels like 10 like really true, you can simply just tap using that thought. There's no good men left out. I swear to God, there's no good men left out there. There's really no good men left out there. And you tap until it starts to feel less and less and less true.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will add that, you just saw me get like kind of, what's the word? Like more emotive as I was tapping. That's helpful because tapping only ever works on an emotion. So if you're kind of disconnected and you're just thinking about it and you're not feeling it, you're actually not going to get good results. So you really have to feel it. It's helpful to identify where the feeling is in your body before you start tapping, things like that. Okay. So then when it comes to the other big aspect of that causes most women to attract in assholes is you feel that you are not worthy, basically. You feel that you are not worthy of being loved. You feel that this is the best I'm going to get. So you don't feel deserving of a good guy. You don't feel worthy of a good guy. And I mean, it's just basic law of attraction, but the psychology explanation is self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And again, it's that reticular activating system. So it convinces you that this is all there is. And so therefore it's either this or I die alone. I hear that from women a lot, right? So the fear of not being lovable and the fear of being alone are very, very powerful fears that will oftentimes lead women to settle and choose not a very good relationship or not a healthy relationship. But the good news is they're both fears that you can tap away, even though I'm afraid that no one good will ever love me, or however you want to say it, right? And then just tapping on, I'm afraid I'm not lovable. I'm afraid I will never get this, tap and tap and tap. I mean, one thing that we know about law of attraction, or for those of you who study law of assumption, is that, and I always just laugh because it is good old fashioned self-fulfilling prophecy that I was taught, a gazillion years ago in undergrad. But what we know is that what we believe is what we create. What we think is what we create in life. And it sounds woo-woo, but it's not even that woo-woo because of this part of our brain that is responsible for that. So when we can shift our thinking, we can shift what we start to see and what starts to show up in our world. Mm-hmm. And going back all the way to the beginning, what did I say when I kind of abandoned traditional talk therapy for EFT? Because I think it's really hard to shift our thinking and we have to kind of like muscle it and like willpower it. And EFT provides this amazing hack that once you tap and clear it, it's like gone. I mean, it is very interesting. And the way I explain it to people the most is I tap a lot with people on traumatic memories. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes if we tap away the story, if I tap away all the points of the story where I could clearly see they go into fight and flight, like they're talking about a car accident and they say, and then this thing happened, their eyes get bug out and their body gets tense. And so when we tap on that story, the number one thing people will say to me at the end is, wow, that's so weird. It's like, I remember the story, but it doesn't feel like mine anymore. It feels like someone else's story. Mm-hmm. And that's the power of EFT because it literally moves the memory from the fight or flight part of our brain to your frontal lobe. You still remember it, but you're not being physiologically activated by it in a way that fear drives you to do certain things that are not good for you and not healthy, like choosing a partner who's not particularly good for you.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, I love that you called it a hack too, because that's exactly what I was thinking. It's another tool for the toolbox. And you mentioned breath work earlier, and I'm just thinking, gosh, like if somebody was doing some daily practice, hello me, I'm the somebody, and of journaling and card pulling and meditating and breath work and all this tapping is in the days that it's harder than others is what's coming up for me. Like the days where you have your belief, you're journaling, you're manifesting, but you don't truly believe it. Like you're not really feeling the emotion attached to that, or you're writing it just to write it because you're supposed to, but to bring in the belief of it. I think that's where tapping for me anyways, like that's where that could show up to really enhance my own personal development practices for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can even just tap with the affirmation, because let's say you're not feeling connected to it or you're feeling doubt. You can just tap and by saying it out loud, the doubt typically comes to the surface in your body, and then you're tapping. So you're actually clearing the doubt just by saying the affirmation.
Yeah. And then that brings us back into the conversation around dating. So if women are trying to manifest the man or the person of their dreams, they can journal beforehand, let's say, and kind of write out who is the person, like get a very clear picture, description of the person, their attributes, their characteristics, maybe what they look like, and then tapping to those things to bring that into your energy. And as you said, yeah, what you think about, you bring about, right? So you're literally manifesting, attracting that person to show up.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, I think it's honestly one of the things that's so missing from the affirmation work that's out there. Because I think affirmations are great. I think they're fantastic. But I think a lot of times people aren't emotionally connected to them, and then they give it up. You know, I talk about like gratitude journals. If you can write 3 things you're grateful for every day, but if you're not feeling grateful, then it doesn't really do much. And most of the time we're not feeling grateful because maybe we're resentful. I mean, maybe you're resentful that you're single again at this point in life. Well, guess what? You can tap away resentment. And then a lot of times when you tap and you clear whatever is blocking the, let's say, gratitude in this case from being there, you clear the block. Well, gratitude naturally comes up because that is our natural state. You know, if you are afraid of truly getting intimate with someone again or falling in love again because you're afraid of getting hurt, then you might actually be choosing emotionally unavailable guys because there's a safety in that. You can't get too close if they're emotionally unavailable. And I'm not saying consciously, I don't think people are consciously doing this, but at a subconscious level, you might be doing that. So if you start to clear away, even though I am afraid of love, or even though love feels painful to me, you know, you start tapping away those blocks to love. Well, love is our natural state and it will come bubbling up. And as we know, when we are feeling more love in our hearts, we are magnets for attracting in more love.
Yes. So that's my little note to say, masturbate more so that you are in a state of love and gratitude with yourself. And so you can attract your person that you're wanting. And just be overall a more happier person in the world. We
Yep. Endorphins and all that good stuff.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Allison. This has been such a great conversation. And you mentioned your book. Please tell us where we can find your book, find you, and if someone was interested in working with you, even yeah, all of the things.
Yeah, thanks. So learntodatelikeagoddess.com is where you can find me. And the name of the book is Find Love Again, Learn to Date Like a Goddess. So actually, I'm offering for all of your podcast listeners a special little treat that they can go to my website and download the ebook for free.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so they can read the book. And if you are interested in talking with me further, I do have a program based on the book. I do have a tapping circle of women where we tap together. And there's actually been research that shows when you set intentions with a group, it magnifies the intention and it's more powerful and it comes to fruition more quickly. So I've created this tapping circle to help us set our intentions for the love of our lives to come in, and B, to sometimes it helps you clear things you didn't even realize were your thing. You know, maybe you didn't realize you're actually out there kind of dating in a little panicky, desperate kind of way because you're afraid of getting too old. And then someone else in the group brings that up. And so we tap on it. And then you realize, oh, wait, that was my issue too. So that's what's, you know, women coming together is just magical. So that's what I'm doing with these days.
I love that. I lead monthly women's circles, and that you are exactly right. When you intention set in a group like that, and especially in a group of women, yeah, I'm like, I can't explain it. Like, it's just magic happens. Like, you just have to come, you just have to experience it. Magic just happens.
It's true. Although there's also a study out of Princeton that talks about it. I think it was the magic number was 6, that 6 or more people who are bonded come together and set intentions. It has been shown to be more powerful. So
I like that.
I know.
Well, this was again, yeah, just wonderful. And as I said, you've inspired me definitely to get to tapping more, because it's a practice that I've not been doing on a regular basis that you've now convinced me and sold me on it. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much.
Guys, go to the website, get her free ebook. We'll make sure to put it in the show notes as well. And are you on social media at all, Instagram or anything like that people can follow you?
Yes, I am on Instagram at Allison_Jayne with a Y, Jayne, Goddess Maker. And I'm also on TikTok, Allison Jayne Goddess Maker.
Perfect. Yes. Well, thank you again for this conversation and coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.